this one you guys are gonna love. People keep telling us, stop talking about AOC. I mean, we don't really talk about her often, but when she does something, we will call her out because, again, there are still people out there that I know.
Stop praising AOC. Everyone stop freaking praising her.
That love her, no matter what she does. And we hope to get through some people just by showing you her own words, the things she says on her own. So here are her imperialist takes on Haiti and Cuba. I discussed Cuba a little bit already, but she actually did an interview with somebody, right, on Cuba with The Hill. And she was, we've seen her both citing Bolivia, Venezuela. She hasn't said anything about Syria. And we'll talk about her comments on Assange, but let's just look at what she says.
The rise of everyday people in the island of Cuba and Cubans, just everyday working class Cubans and Cubans all across the island, standing up for their rights and standing up for to protest the intolerable conditions that have been happening on the island. This includes everything from the desperate lack of medical supplies and other key whether it's medical supplies, food, or other key materials or utilities throughout the island, particularly exacerbated during the pandemic. During the pandemic. I apologize. Sorry about that. So they are protesting the lack of materials during the pandemic, particularly the lack of medical supplies and other issues. And so one of the things that we're trying to accomplish, and one of the things that we want to make sure that we communicate, is our solidarity with the Cuban people. They have requested international solidarity with their movement, and we stand in strong solidarity. And one of the things that's important for us to discuss is some of the contributing factors into this situation. One thing that we must unequivocally condemn are anti-democratic actions on behalf of the Diaz-Canel administration. And we want to make extremely clear that suppression of the freedom of press and the suppression of protest and the suppression of freedom of speech is unacceptable and runs contrary to our democratic values. And we call on the Diaz-Canel administration to treat all protesters and to condemn any police violence and to reverse any and all policies of that. Now, the other piece of this is the US administration. And what's extraordinarily important for us to communicate as well is the actions and US contributions to the suffering of Cubans on the island as well. And that is directly related to the embargo, the US embargo, economic embargo.
Okay.
Both sizing it, right, fam?
Yeah. AOCIA.
I was going to say AOC is CIA, so.
Yeah, AOCIA. Look, you can even tell her whole grift is like fledgling at this point, right? Like she's like, I'm sorry, excuse me. And this isn't the only interview. We're going to show another one where she is like having a hard time getting her words out. I don't know if it's maybe the fact that people are catching on to who she is, or she's under a lot of pressure, maybe from her handlers, whatever the case may be, she's not performing like the way she used to, because before she was more of like Obama-esque and convincing, right? This is just the surface level of what she's saying. Now, what she was saying is basically giving progressive branding to imperialist takes. Because what she's doing is she's saying, okay, yeah, the embargo, but look at all these problems that these people are having. She is using CIA talking points, NATO talking points, propaganda, that acting like the vast majority of Cubans are out there protesting against their government. No, AOC, the vast majority of Cubans are protesting to defend their government. Absolutely. Are there criticisms that they have? Absolutely. There is dissent. There is dissent in Cuba. That is without a fact. I've talked about it several times now. People want, they feel like they don't have enough money from the government. They feel like they have to do second jobs. They rely heavily on tourism. So yes, COVID has hurt their economy. It's hurt everybody's economy. She mentions the lack of medical supplies. Do you hello? That's the United States. Like, they have, in spite of all of that, managed to have really great medical care in Cuba. They have their own vaccine now. They have managed to have doctors go all over the world and help people. That in spite of the U.S. embargo. So she's minimizing the embargo, and putting it all on Díaz-Canel, who's the current president of Cuba. And if you know anything about Cuban democracy, it's actually more direct democracy than we have, believe it or not. You don't have to be a member of the Communist Party in Cuba at all. To run for office, to do anything. You don't have to be. You can be. People choose to be, but it's not required. So she doesn't know, right? It's clear she's not well informed on what's actually happening. And if you're going to talk about the protests, right, the people protesting against the government, you must talk about the thousands of people protesting to defend their government. And that is you have to talk about that. You can't just leave that out, especially as a legislator, because you're manufacturing consent to say, oh, the U.S. must intervene. And then, of course, rich of her to talk about the freedom of the press. What freedom of the press do we have here?
Yeah, I was about to talk about that.
We have been, go ahead. Just
I was going to talk about, if you're concerned about freedom of the press, and obviously we're going to get onto the take about Julian Assange, you're going to talk about censorship and all this other shit going on. We have problems right here at home. You got some nerve to go over there and start pointing the finger at the other country. And I think a lot of people have fallen into this trap, right? The whole thing we were talking about, Assad is a brutal dictator, but we shouldn't be there anyways. The Cuban leadership is awful what they're doing to their people, but we shouldn't be there anyways. That's not good enough. Hamas. We condemn Hamas, but, we shouldn't allow Israel to do these things. You can't do that. You can't both sides it. Because both siding the issue when it comes to foreign policy, at the end of the day, manufacturers consent for sanctions, for intervention, for straight up just getting involved. And I fear stuff like that when we talk about China, this whole thing about some people saying, well, we shouldn't really be messing around with China in the South China Sea, but what they're doing to the citizens and what they're doing to the Uyghurs is just awful. You know what I'm saying? We have to stop the manufacturing consent. And we're going to show a lot of things we've talked about in the past. I don't know, I think it was over 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we showed a video of Assad driving around his country in a Honda Datsun or some shit like that with no security whatsoever and stuff like that. If you're a brutal dictator, you know what I'm saying? You're not going to be able to do those things or show up at local events and everything. So, we really have to start having the courage as journalists, as independent media, to call it like it is. You know what I'm saying? No, the Cuban government has done great by their people. Of course there's dissent. There's going to be dissent in any country. But who are we to do anything? Who are we to say anything? And to say that people are in the streets protesting against this government when we know it's a small, little, tiny slice of people, you know what I'm saying? And secondly, not mention that they're being fueled by NGOs, groups like the NED, the OAN, the OAS. These groups are CIA light. And you have to mention that. You know what I'm saying? Without this money from this outside forces, you might see nobody in the streets, fam. Nobody against the government.
You can tell a color revolution by the American flags, by the vast coverage by mainstream media and every outlet, but the vast lack of coverage of the other side, by the propaganda. They all say the same thing, right on par. We've been here before. She knows that. She knows this. I genuinely believe she knows this, but she is told to say this. And that's because, I think she's now an intelligence asset, but and maybe she always was. And I think that's the question. That's what we're finding out. Yeah. That she might have always been. And I firmly believe that, but there's still more data to uncover in regard to that. But it's obvious. If I know that this is going on in Cuba, it's not that she doesn't know. I think she knows, and she has to say these points. And she seems kind of tormented or just distracted or absent-minded when she was talking about this. It really didn't add to the credibility. It looks really bad. And she's, again, manufacturing consent. As you said, it's a wedge. You're driving a wedge. You're saying, but because you're saying, oh, these people are protesting these awful conditions. Look at the awful conditions we have in the United States of America. You don't have to like Cuba's government. And I say this all the time. You can hate Fidel Castro. You can hate communism. You can think that it's not the best thing. You don't live in Cuba. Don't live there. Like, if you don't like it, don't live there. That's fine. You can say, you know what? I may disagree with them, but guess what? Let Cuba handle their shit. Do not push U.S. imperialism. You can say that, but what you don't say is, oh, they're this brutal dictatorship, blah, 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 and all this crap, because that is different, and that manufacturers can say.
Yeah, that's the issue too. I have with like a lot of, like, I see now too as well. Remember we talked about a year ago about Donald Trump saying, like, you know, the generals don't like me, the soldiers love me, but the generals don't like me because they want to end this war. They want to stay in these stupid wars, and that's what they want. But yet at the end of the day, he's, you know, engaging in arms sales with the Saudis and Israelis, and arming all the oppositions to these socialist governments to the T with NGOs, whatnot, and supporting regime change and stuff like that. What I'm trying to say is that there's a thin line right now. We have to understand this right here today. We have to say it loud. We have to say it proud. There's no more half-stepping, right? That was a song by Big Daddy Kane. You won't know that, fam. That's hip-hop. Ain't no half-stepping. But you can't do it no more. You can't say shit like Assad's a brutal dictator. However, we shouldn't be there. That doesn't make a difference. You're saying something that the CIA wants you to say. Because once you plant that seed that Assad's a brutal dictator, that will always give an open door for American imperialism to come on in, and will be justified through the people because they'll have it in their mind that Assad is a brutal dictator. Same thing I heard a lot of conservatives say, Trump fans and friends of mine and stuff like that. Well, yeah, but if we pull out of these areas, won't China just kind of go in after? It's like, well, you have no evidence of that. But the fact is that you act like you don't want a never-ending war, but yet you still kind of justify it at the very end. Their foreign policy habits of going ahead and saying, well, you know, these wars are stupid, but we have to do it to stop this dictator, are very equivalent to, oh, the squad is not the best, but yet they're still more aligned with us, so we have to vote for them. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like it's the same thing for both sides.
Yeah. And it's, you know, since you said something about, you know, ensuring democracy and press freedom in Cuba, let's talk about how much she's ensured press freedom in America. Because as far as I know, AOC hasn't ever said Julian Assange should be free. AOC instead has ran away from reporters asking her questions. And this is where finally she said something about him in 2019. Let's listen to what she said.
Do you have a comment on Assange's arrest and indictment? I think there's a lot of concern, you know, even for folks who are, who disagree or are troubled by Assange's past. To my knowledge, the specific charges that were raised for his extradition were even ones that the Obama administration entertained but turned down because it was seen as kind of beyond the pale in terms of an attack on journalism and journalists. And so I'm concerned by that specific aspect, very much so in this situation.
The only people who are concerned about his past actions, AOC, is the military-industrial complex and the CIA. Sorry, fam, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, it's this whole, well, I'm going to dip my toe here, I'm going to dip my toe there, because she has to signal to progressives, but she also has to signal to the establishment, I'm going to play ball at the end of the day. I will say what needs to get done. If I were a state agency and I wanted to take over and convince people that to do what I wanted them to do, I wouldn't directly oppose everything they do. I would put out somebody who pretends to embrace their ideals, their branding, but throw in some signals to say, hey, you're going to play ball. That's what I would do if I was a psychopathic, you know, oligarch, state agency, whatever. Like that's what they're doing now. They've given up on the Nancy Pelosi's of the world. No, it's theater now. She gets to pretend she opposes Pelosi. Democrats get to pretend they oppose Republicans. Meanwhile, who's in control? The national security state apparatus and the military industrial complex. It is that simple, you guys. It is that simple. It's not conspiratorial. That is a fact. And you can tell by the candidates they're putting through, because what better way to convince people to continue relying on the illusion of the two-party system than to actually give them a little bone of what they want. Continue dangling that carrot so they continue playing the game over and over again.
And fam, it's the illusion.
Illusion.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, any other comments coming from the show? I'm going to defer to the caucus leadership. Go right ahead, fam.
So AOC's comments on Haiti are also pretty terrible, and they were called out by everybody. So Garland Nixon said, AOC basically said, don't invade Haiti without a plan. Rokana, Bill Kristol, is one of the most thoughtful voices in defending liberalism and democratic institutions in our country. Rokana literally said that. This is what now passes for progressive politics in the blue brainwashed cult. Exactly. That's what we're telling you guys. It's not real. Danny Haifog, AOC stumbles through this question on Haiti and essentially advocates neo-colonialism by claiming the U.S. should support Haiti in selecting a new leader. The only thing the U.S. should be doing is getting out of Haiti. U.S. interventions and coups are the root of the crisis. So, Anything to comment before we watch the video?
No, I'm going to comment after the video too, because
okay.
I mean, once again, we have to think about who killed the president right now in Haiti, and who is our biggest puppet government in the global South. Just think about that, ladies and gentlemen.
I think there are an enormous amount of concerns. I, first of all, applaud the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, but this is, the intention of that is to not relocate troops from Afghanistan to anywhere else. And I don't believe that was the intention in withdrawal from the White House either. But this situation is extraordinarily delicate and extremely fragile. And I do not believe right now that the introduction of U.S. troops particularly without any sort of plan, sets any community, whether it's the U.S. or whether it is Haitians, up for success. I do believe that with the assassination, the people of Haiti and the country is in a very delicate moment, and our role should be in supporting a peaceful transition and a peaceful democratic process for selecting a new leader, and avoiding any sort of violence, but particularly in really carrying any, supporting any due process for justice here in the United States for any actors that may have been complicit on U.S. soil.
Bam.
God, man, this woman has just word salads, left and right. I mean, Jesus, fam. I mean, this woman cannot take a position on everything. She's all over the place.
Yeah.
She's awful on foreign policy. This is something we talk about all the time. I mean, she has gotten F in foreign policy. So.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to point out right away, she said, this is how you know she's signaling to the establishment. She said, I believe it wasn't the intention of the White House to, put troops from Afghanistan elsewhere. That was exactly their intention. That was exactly. Their intention.
We knew they weren't leaving that region. We knew that.
We have private mercenaries. We've always had them. We were never going to stop. And now they have no accountability to any institution because they're private mercenaries. She knows, she is blatantly lying, gaslighting the public. It is very obvious to me. She's uncomfortable this whole time. She's fledgling, this is not the normal AOC performance we get. So I'm very, very interested in her behavior here too. Another thing, she says we need to support a democratic transition. If this was any other country saying that, I might buy it. But when we say that, we mean we're going to involve ourselves, and we already have. So when you use that language, it's so broad that it could mean that, and it could mean something else. So again, signaling to the establishment, this is what we're going to support democracy. Anytime somebody says that now, regime change playbook. Like, we already know what happened in Haiti, and you can talk more about that if you want. But she's, again, I just think she's using progressive language to push imperialism. And she also said, so if the White House lays out a plan, you know, it's okay, is what she's saying. Like, no, it's not. We need to stay the hell out. That's all you need to say. You know what? We need to let Haiti deal with the situation. We need to stay out. If the U.S. government is involved in this, they need to be held accountable.
Yeah, she should say that. We've been involved far too long. We need to stay out and stop intervening in people's business, plain and simple.
That's it.
And she shouldn't be trying to justify any other actions, but she is. She's justifying other actions and whatnot. And that's going to really, what she's going to do is she's going to dupe a lot of progressives to go along with her. I guess this Saturday we'll see at least 3 AOC shirts at the march. At least. That's going to be my guess. More than TYT shirts, but at least 3 AOC shirts. That's what I'm guessing. Also, something that I wanted to bring up. This is something that was just out a couple hours ago. I didn't even get a chance to talk to Niko about this, but put this tweet up over here. You check it out. Haiti's president said there hadn't been one single jab administered in Haiti. They used holistic methods. He refused the WHO's 750,000 Johnson & Johnson jabs. DEA implicated in his assassination months later. White House press secretary says U.S. will personally send jabs to Haiti 2 days later. You can draw your own conclusions. I'm just putting the info out there because enough people haven't been talking about it. Haiti's numbers were extremely low before Moises' death. Their holistic remedies have been working there. U.S. force feeds vaccines onto Haiti's people. At the very bare minimum, this is unethical behavior, not unlike we've seen in the West exhibit in its treatment of African and nations of Afro-descended populations in the past. And it's never turned out well. They don't do shit for the good of Black people. And I mean shit. And Niko put that out there. That's something interesting. I've been talking to a person who used to work for the Haitian government, who's supposedly an independent-minded thinker. I'm going to get more information on it. Hopefully we can have him on the show. We need to get answers to understand what was going on in Haiti, because there are people who are saying that this particular president got in under the mindset that he was a puppet of the oligarchs and the West. As things started to turn out, as we started getting later on in his administration, it turns out he's not maybe such a pet of the oligarchs of the West. Either he had a turn of heart or he was trying to play the game. Who knows? We need to educate ourselves more on this. So I plan on reaching out to talk to more people in the region to see what they have to say about Moises so we can tie the knot together and understand why they had him whacked. Because it's obvious that the West was involved. That we know. But we have to find out for what reasons why and then kind of move forward.
Yeah, I mean, from what I was reading, he was actually highly like a puppet president, an oligarch. And then that relationship started souring. And the Haiti was up for elections in September. And of course, what a perfect opportunity. Get rid of this guy that's no longer useful. Whatever reason he, was no longer useful, we exactly don't know. But there was an election coming up. So I definitely think that had a lot to do with it. Perhaps the manipulations by the West, what Niko said, that could definitely play into it as well. But I definitely think it had something to do with Haitians being able to elect somebody they want, because that would put a damper into certain plans. So
I want to give this piece of bait, this piece of meat to our audience, because I know they're so good at finding stuff. So maybe we can find out their treatments of the COVID and what they were doing when they talk about holistic and whatever means of treatment they were doing. Let's try to figure out what's what, because I don't know if that is true that they've turned down 750,000 jabs of Johnson & Johnson. That's very interesting to kind of think like, wait a second, hold on, let me see what's going on. It also helps with the storyline as far as how we can treat COVID, as opposed to getting an emergency vaccine to keep other people safe,
Yeah. And, just along the lines, fam, of like talking about manufacturing consent, because it's so easily done. You kind of already said it, but Americans, Westerners, stop talking about Assad being a brutal dictator, because I see this a lot on the left, even on people who get accolades on a lot of things regarding Syria, because this is Kevork Al-Masian. I am going to have him on the show soon when we get back. President Bashar al-Assad and his family went yesterday to the wedding of wounded SAA veteran Somar Sultan and his bride in Jardula in Syria. And this is the overdose of police state and brutal dictator. Looking at these photos, it does not seem like this guy is a brutal dictator. He's at a wedding. If like Pasta said, if he was, where's his security? He wouldn't be able to freely do this. He would be dead.
No, he would be dead in a second.
So okay, there's Vanessa Beeley. Vanessa Beeley constantly talks about Syria, right? She's been there. So has Eva Bartlett. What she's seen is a reverence and an admiration for Bashar al-Assad. She talks about it all the time. Here is President Bashar al-Assad with his family visiting Tartus Sheikh Badr right now, and Syrian Arab Republic Truth. This is from Real Syria, and she's retweeting it with more dictator travels. And there he is again, just traveling, and people just outside, like, excited to see him. He's a secular president. It's really, I just, I'm not saying the guy's a saint, right? I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is this whole knee-jerk reaction to call him a brutal dictator. I want to see your evidence if you're going to say that. That is a very hefty accusation. And when you say things like that, you manufacture consent, right? Because Israel is bombing Syria again, as of a few hours ago. And we still have portions of our left getting accolades about Syria while spewing CIA talking points like Assad being a brutal dictator. These comments manufacture consent for intervention. It's interesting and rich for us to talk about dictatorship as we're increasingly becoming fascistic. We haven't even begun talking about the door knocking. We're going to talk about that. We have to talk more about, what's going on here, because the things that people are saying are crazy. We did a whole show on COVID on Rokfin only, but it's, to me, it's scary times, Pasta. I have to say this. We have still the audacity to call Castro, Maduro, Bashar al-Assad. If these people aren't supported by, if these leaders aren't supported by their people, good. Like, let the people handle it. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing the propaganda to manufacture that. And if that's the case, if that is happening, let these countries handle it. But I have not seen that happening. And it's so obnoxious to see just a lot of us continue using the same talking points, because again, just like AOC, you're still both siding, you're still leaving that wedge to allow for us to intervene.
A lot of the people who call me up and we speak whatnot, some of my friends that really give me advice on the show, and mentors of sorts, what I'm saying, they always talk to me about the power of language and how important it is, being the fact that I can't even speak it. When I'm able to get some words out and stuff like that, and the things I talk about, how powerful it is. And this is something that the CIA or the military industrial complex or the predator class, whatever you want to say, has put out there. This type of kind of language where you can say, oh, he's a brutal dictator, but we shouldn't be there anyways. That's the point. No, we have to stop doing it. I know it's the third time I'm saying it in the show, but it is so important because, I used to be okay with that same language too as well, to just say something, because the main point is that we shouldn't be intervening whatsoever, but it does matter because the words are powerful. And if we blanket somebody as a brutal dictator like Assad, who, once again, a couple of years ago, we showed that whole, I was just looking for it right now, Assad driving around in a Datsun, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You couldn't do those things if you're, here it is, a Bashar al-Assad film driving himself to the Syrian civil war's front line. I mean, come on. You could never, ever, 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 ever do something like that if you were a brutal dictator. The people will kill you right away. You know what I'm saying? And they have pictures of Castro doing that same shit.
I know somebody said in the YouTube chat, dictators can be popular. If you look at Hitler, yes, that was a specific thing. Like, technically you could, but he wasn't being brutal against his own people. Do you see what I'm saying? He was being brutal against like 6 million Jews. Like that he was being brutal against them. He wasn't being brutal. He wasn't like being brutal against his own people, so to speak. I haven't seen evidence of Bashar al-Assad being brutal against his own people. I see him been brutal against the white helmets. I've seen him been brutal against people trying to intervene in his country. But again, who are we to really meddle in those affairs? That is irrelevant. And when it came to Hitler, because a lot of people always bring this up, the United States were the last ones to go in there. There was that meme I shared that I got banned on Facebook for, where it was like the USSR army, like with a bunch of like a giant, like the US was a giant T-Rex and the USSR was a bunch of soldiers. And that's what happened. Like so it's not like the United States goes into countries. You can talk about Rwanda if they don't have a reason to go into them. So that's just food for thought in regard to that comment.
Yeah, and I think Hitler, he was an imperialist. He went around, he kind of, the Nazis. And let's not forget, the Rothschilds supported the Nazis, right? They funded the Nazis, they funded the communists, they funded everybody, you know what I'm saying? But it's a different situation when you have a war-torn country, you know what I'm saying? And that's it. Like, as far as Syria is involved here, you know what I'm saying? It's their own country. They're not like, this is not like a guy who's kind of expanding an empire where people loved him. Like, I think it was the Sweden, or was it the Swiss? I can't remember. When Hitler went into another country, one of the first countries he invaded, they greeted him with roses and flowers. They wanted him to come in.
Right.
So, it's a whole different situation than a war-torn country where you have a guy who can drive around in a Datsun, when there's missiles and bombs flying and other people are killing each other. I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? We have to watch. Language is powerful. And from this point forward, we have to make sure that we don't say these words and manufacture consent to the CIA, because they're the ones who have planted these mechanisms, and the left shouldn't be running with it at all.
No, not at all. 100%.
Black in the Empire says, come to see some real news. Came to see some real news, as I'm burping over here. Sorry. Came to see some real news. Thank you, Black in the Empire. Thank you for the 85 people who are hanging out on the Rokfin. We had over 400 people at one point. I think we're 353 on the YouTubes. So, fam, anything else we got to talk about this show? Or are we done?
You forgot Snorky Y2K. Actually, Hitler killed atheists, homosexuals, journalists, and people with birth defects before the Jewish. You're right. He did. Hitler was an awful person. Nobody's denying that. I want to make sure that's very clear. But I'm just saying the situation was different than what people are making Assad to be. They're making him out to be like this Hitler-esque figure, and I have not seen evidence of that.
And Hitler rolled deep. Yeah.
Even though he's, both were popular, right? Yes, you can't deny Hitler was popular. I'm saying this is a different situation. I'm not just basing it on his popularity. I'm basing it on the fact that he has all kinds of people like saying, hey, this isn't what's happening, guys. You guys are spreading, propaganda, Western propaganda. The fact that we have vested interest in trying to sanction Syria and trying to get there. The fact that Israel's constantly bombing them. This is a whole different situation than Hitler, because the reason I mentioned Hitler is because that's the go-to of a lot of the knee-jerk left to like, oh, you're supporting Hitler. And it's like, not everybody that disagrees with you is Hitler, guys. But they run with this whole thing. So
and Hitler rolled deep. Hitler had a posse all the time. Hitler couldn't go out in a little motorcycle by himself around the country. He would have got killed. At one point, with a war-torn country, he would have got killed. Hitler rolled deep. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kind of pointing out the fact that after years and years and years of civil war, once again, I don't even consider it a civil war because it was ingested by, the military-industrial complex, the Pentagon. You know what I'm saying? This was a funded opposition to Bashar al-Assad. He can still now roll around his country, go to weddings like this. You know what I'm saying? We have to be careful with these words and stuff. The people of Syria, they are the victims here. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like Bashar al-Assad had a beef with just somebody and just couldn't put the opposition down, and the opposition kept fighting. No, his opposition was heavily funded. You know what I'm saying? They were funded to the T. This goes all the way back to Obama. You know what I'm saying? This goes all the way back to the moderate rebels who were funded against them. They got weapons from the West to fight against Bashar al-Assad, and that's a big difference.
Exactly, guys.